It's now my great pleasure to introduce to you Vartan Gregorian, the 12th President of Carnegie Corporation of New York. During his tenure, he has championed the causes of education, immigration, and international peace and security, key concerns of the corporation's founder, Andrew Carnegie. In addition, since Vartan Gregorian assumed the presidency in 1997, the corporation has given more than $79 million in grants to libraries across the world. Vartan Gregorian is known for his devotion to higher education and is the highly respected President Emeritus of Brown University and former Provost and Founding Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences of the University of Pennsylvania. Vartan Gregorian is credited with revitalizing the New York Public Library during his tenure as its president in the 1980s. The recipient of more than 75 honorary degrees, he has been decorated by many governments from around the world. In 1998, President Bill Clinton awarded him the National Humanities Medal, and in 2004, President George W. Bush awarded him the Presidential Medal of Honor. It is a great honor to have us with you tonight, President Gregorian. And I invite Helen and you for your conversation.
So, thank you so much, Jürgen. And hello, Vartan.
Hello. Good evening.
So, good evening, good afternoon. And I was just looking up Vartan, and it's exactly the same temperature in Manhattan as it is in Dublin.
Is it good or bad?
Bland.
Okay.
Vartan, as Jürgen has just outlined, you've had the most extraordinary life. I mean, an incredible life, starting as an Armenian Christian in Iran, and then with the support of your grandmother and the support of so many other people, coming to America via Beirut, and then and going to Stanford, and then becoming the president of Brown University, the president of one of my absolute favorite libraries in the world, the New York Public Library, and now president of the Carnegie Corporation of New York. And I wondered, would you talk as sort of how that experience has, and the power of perseverance and the power of people's support and the transformative power of education and of knowledge and of libraries, how has that shaped your philosophy and your approach in your current position now as president of the Carnegie Corporation?
Well, the books have played a major role in my life, but I was very poor. I read many novels, which took me to Europe, took me to Asia, and suffered with heroes and commiserated with oppression, people of oppressed peoples, all of it without having been, not even having a map of Europe or Asia. But the books remind me, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who said, people are not born once and for all when their mother gives birth to them, but rather throughout their lives, they give rebirth to themselves. And they give rebirth to themselves, in my opinion, through library books, imagination, the diaries. In this case, I was a page in the Archdiocese Library in Azerbaijan, Iranian Azerbaijan, Tabriz, and I spent more time there, read something I did not understood, read a lot I understood, but it was a free education, but also boon to imagination. So the books have occupied throughout my life an important role, and libraries as well. I consider libraries secular cathedrals, and also the fact that Trinity, I'm glad you're doing this, because I would say Trinity College and Trinity Library, College Library, are diaries of Ireland, the good, the ugly, as well as the sublime, all are coexisting themselves. The memory of Ireland, its achievement. And therefore, individuals are not only sustained, nations are sustained, religions are sustained. All the religions are claimed people of the book. Prophet Muhammad accepted Christians and Jews because they had a book, people of the book, Abraham's book. coming to Protestant movement, again, the book. The book has been central in the humanities for people like me to be on the sidelines of Europe, sidelines of Middle East, and so forth. Books were said as instruments of liberation and education. So that was my time. I came to the British Museum first time, 1960, when I was Ford Foundation Fellow. And I felt, by God, sitting there, say Karl Marx sat there, Darwin sat there, John Stuart Mill sat there. Suddenly I see 800,000 volumes just in the reading room. It's the only institution can make everybody humble, but also to know that you still have to learn more. And if you made even one small contribution in that, you're adding to the collective memory of mankind. I fell in love with the libraries because libraries did not discriminate. Rational, irrational poets, novelists, everybody has contributed to the library. They exist together. Most tolerant institution when people don't destroy books unless they decide to eliminate the culture. So I owe my education to libraries because they did not cost much. Believe it or not, we had to rent books to pay. So I came to Britain. I needed validation that I was doing research to come. But when I became president of New York Public Library, I was thrilled that there were no charges, no identity cards. Nobody had the right to say, why are you checking out so many books? Confidential, respect for it. So when Gorbachev's daughter came to visit New York Public Library, I was told not to mention it, but I said, Lenin in 1913 wrote an editorial about New York Public Library. He had just read the first annual report of New York Public Library. It was not even the revolutionary year, 1912, 1913. He said, what Russia needs is a New York Public Library. So I was dumbfounded that nobody asked me for an entry fee or anything. It was your right as a citizen, as well as non-citizen, as well as human being, to have access to the library. So that's as much respect I have for libraries. I continue to have it because they're the only institutions that give earthly immortality. No institution gives earthly immortality except the libraries. If one library is extinguished, there are others over there. So it's humanity's diary, humanity's memory, humanity's quest for knowledge, quest for absolution, quest for everything, because that's humanity's heritage. That's how much libraries affected me.
That's a paean of celebration of libraries.
Yes, that's why I accepted to talk to you.
Well, I was so honored when you said you would, and they're both humbling and inspiring. And in fact, when you said about cathedrals, when the British Library moved from the British Museum into its current building, you know, that is this wonderful cathedral-like entrance. Or people say when they go into the long room and they take in the ark, that it's like a cathedral to the book. And I do think it's really interesting how the New York Public Library, I love the fact that is for everyone and it's free. And in some ways that's what's so inspirational about the concept behind virtual library. It's free, yeah. Yeah. I was so moved by that, Walter. But could I bring you on to Andrew Carnegie, who was another remarkable man, a Scotsman, wasn't he? And so he, as we've heard, he created so many libraries around the world. In fact, an American friend of mine who was brought up in Maryland, she thought that libraries were called Carnegies. She didn't know they were called libraries. And here in Ireland, 66 Carnegie libraries were built, of which 62 are still in use. And in fact, the mail service, the postal service has just last year, I think, had some commemorative stamps. Well, how do you see Carnegie's stellar legacy living on and morphing in the age of COVID?
Yeah, well, I read the Carnegie, believe it or not, in Armenian at first, when I was in Tabriz, Iran. Self-made man, they said, because I had not realized that his parents were Chartists, uncle and others. And so there's a social justice element there, equality element there, built it already there. And then also, of course, he was an autodidact. He learned, he discovered also value of the books. And he established 2,000-3,000 libraries just in American and other English-speaking lands. And because he wanted people to rediscover themselves, discover their heritage, but also knowledge was the essence of the libraries, and he wanted to benefit as well as he wanted others to benefit. He also did something peculiar, which not many people know. 7,200 church organs also donated. I'm sure you have got it in Ireland also, because he was afraid that preachers make the spirit of Christianity dull. And therefore he wanted to have the music to elevate the spirit as well as. He also was interested in peace, of course. He also was interested very much in teacher pensions. People do not realize Andrew Carnegie was the one who said, I was trustee of Cornell and few British and other universities, Scottish as well, that he would if you have good professors, high-standing faculty, he will pay for the pension funds. But pretty soon could not afford all of that, so established TIA CREF with $11 million loan, which I went to ask them return on daily basis compounded. They laughed at me. But it's now $1 trillion. So if nothing else, Andrew Carnegie did, supporting teacher pensions, professors' pensions, and others, launched as a principle. And he was disappointed in World War I, destroyed his faith, because he thought reason prohibits any kind of war, because reasonable people, especially capitalists, can find plenty of competition in their areas without destroying each other. So he established Carnegie Palace of Peace in Holland, which is a library we support also. He established all kinds of universities and others because he believed reason will be ultimate umpire in regulating divisions among people. So I'm very proud to be head of the Carnegie Corporation of New York, because for a person who did not have book, to be able to give book to millions is the greatest blessing in my life, that I was there when X number came. And I tell you one thing, because you're in a campaign for book preservation of the legacy of Ireland as a legacy of Europe, legacy of mankind, they're all intertwined. And no nation can live without its diary, and Ireland has its diary in your wonderful library at elsewhere. So the only check I did not cash at New York Public Library came from somebody who sent me the last Social Security check of $8.90. Said, I don't have money to send, but I'm sending this. And I was so touched that his last pennies is giving library. So library is each person's duty to support, because it provides continuity. That's why Orwell's 1984 focused on that very issue. If you eliminate memory, there's no past. Therefore, there's no future. Only present becomes perpetuity. If memory is dead, everything is possible. That was the Orwellian notion of life. So New York Public Library was supported by people. because through taxes as well as donations. And that's the only cause, also is non-political, because the right, the left, the disbelievers, believers, fanatics, peacemakers, all of them are there. I was surprised one day to go to Jewish division to see Trotskyites, Orthodox Jews, all of them setting their arms, hiding themselves from the other and doing research there. But because they had to go there, their identity is there. Their past is there, their future is there. Because again, Gabriel Garcia Marquez said, we give rebirth to ourselves each time we read. Especially pandemics proved that point. Libraries are not gone out of it. On the contrary, more publications are read, more bought and advertised, because people return to the essential element, which is the book, which gives you fantasy to think about, but also to enjoy the past, present, and future. Anyways, to answer long-winded way to your question.
That was absolutely fascinating. Vartan, so you have, I mean, when you were so successful as a fundraiser for Brown and then your public library, and now you're on the other side of the table, so to speak. And when we first met in Manhattan, I was really, really struck by just the depth of your just comprehension and just sophisticated understanding about the pitfalls, actually, of support and philanthropy, you know, and that the signature building gets supported, the shiny new thing, and then there's all the behind the scenes that needs to happen. And I'll be discreet, but I once went to a Middle Eastern country and went to their conservation department, and there was this wonderful piece of equipment, a leaf caster, which is for repairing paper, where you emulate the way that paper is made in the first place. And I would have loved one. I can't remember whether I was at the British Library or the Victoria and Albert Museum at the time. I would have loved one. And it was sitting there unused. And it was given in a very, very well-meaning way, but very well-intentioned, by a West European government agency. But there was hardly any electricity. And in fact, the gossip was that the president's brother was a candle maker, but that's another story. Yeah. And the conservators, there was no money. They were making a living as taxi drivers. So it was so well-intentioned, but the impact was negligible. Would you talk a little bit about that, you know, how to have the great impact?
Yes, Indira Gandhi government invited me to go to India at the time when I was president of the York Public Library, and Japanese did the same thing. I went to visit in Calcutta and elsewhere, their big libraries, and I was appalled. Since then, things have improved, of course. I said, how are you getting good? Each published book, we get 2 copies like Library of Congress. I said, congratulations. What do you do next? We send them downstairs. What else do you do there? It's not part of my duty. All right, I've done my duty. So if a book is not preserved, it has its own destruction, acid paper especially. That's one of the reasons 200, 300, I forget the exact number of authors signed a manifesto at New York Public Library not to publish any books on acid paper, as one of the things. But poor countries, and this was the same thing Bill Gates, when we initially started helping libraries, school libraries, we forgot some of them did not have electricity. You know, you can give computer, you can give, but you don't have the maintenance and all of this. So the answer to your question is, having been both sides of the fence, when somebody comes, they go a lengthy lecture. I did not think we had that lengthy lecture from you. And then at the end, when they're leaving, said, by the way, we have a library project. So now when people come and say, let's start with by the way first, then we can talk about other issues. So you become sensitive who are crusaders of culture, who are people not able to raise money. And also, believe it or not, it's a very important thing for your listeners who help the library, your library. I never mention their ego as the biggest building, biggest this, but rather you'll be remembered, your organization and so forth, for being part of the future, preservation of the future. It's the libraries are the only instruments of immortality of their time mentioned already. Only one. Buildings disappear because of asbestos and so forth. The library as Borges was a librarian of Argentine, librarian, writer, philosopher, said, imagine paradise in the form of a library. Because there are 1,000 melodies, variations, themes of the music, scores, and so forth. The whole preservation of culture and the spirit of Ireland is creativity in English and Irish literature and so forth, philosophy. It's not to mention diaspora Irish and whatever. It's a fantastic thing. So as I were your place, I would say not duty, but enlightenment of an individual and organization is behind the donation. So I've never appealed people for their ego, because I always thank people who came. I said, you're here because you're generous. And I always quoted Francis d'Assisi. It's in the giving that we receive. And I jokingly said, you have received more than you've given. Because you've given your education, you've become wealthy, you become great writer, great composer, great artist, and so forth. And this is what is going to save your legacy for your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, for your nation, for your community, for your people. So it's the best investment in a way, preserving one's memory, because you constantly give rebirth to yourself, but also you reconnect with your nation, you reconnect with your community, past struggles and so forth. And that's one of the reasons when I visited Trinity College, I was so impressed. It will look like everything else which are prosperous nations had in Europe. Because Irish, when we're poor, they knew their church, their library, their university cannot be poor, must not be poor, must be self-sufficient, because it deals with the future, both as symbol as well as reality.
I didn't know you were going to quote Borges, but when we reopened the treasury where the Book of Kells is, the only thing that's on the wall is his quote, I've always imagined that paradise is a type of library.
That's why he quoted, yeah.
And the long room, we look on it as the front room of the nation, and it actually holds the very emblem of the nation with the Brian Brew harp. And in fact, you make me think also the death of the library has been predicted forever. And yet, you know, and I know that they're absolutely flourishing. And in fact, at Trinity, when we had to close in March for COVID, the centrality of the library became brutally reinforced as a sanctuary, as an oasis. When we started to reopen gradually, it was very searing. One postgraduate said that they'd done more in 2 hours in the library than in 2 months at home, because they'd been in a maelstrom of anxiety and they couldn't, it was almost like we were a non-clinical support. So that is so important. It's been really, really reinforced. In fact, the provost has said, and others have said, when the library's open, the university's open. And on the other hand, we've also got the 24-hour library that never shut. So we had the accelerant of the virtual. And so again, those two sides How do you see things developing?
Well, I tell you one thing, this is a very important issue you raised. Libraries made Amazon very rich, all right? Because Amazon said, our mission is to distribute books initially. They did not contribute to purchase of the book, cataloging of the book, but they were beneficiaries of the book, and libraries did not mind. After all, our mission is to circulate as many volumes as possible. But people confuse, books are not data. They have identity. They're not volume alone, all right? Nobody says such and such data is dedicated to my love, all right?
True.
All right, I'm just saying. So when the last resort is, what I tell my students when I was teaching, imagine you now, each one of you having your own Library of Alexandria. Ptolemy and all of this, Egypt was 259 BC and so forth, because knowledge belongs to the ruler. Knowledge belongs to people now. Imagine each individual has its own Library of Alexandria with all the creations of mankind, and you don't take any advantage of it because you like to be entertained, not necessarily ever educated and so forth. So libraries also provide a kind of synthesis of our culture and knowledge of humanity and our link with the rest of humanity. That's why all the rulers you had in Europe had their own library, even though they did not, some of them read a lot or do a lot. It was part of power of and libraries are the same. If you want to reserve one institution which will preserve humanity's mind, libraries, thank God for technology will help them preserve it. But the idea always overwhelms me that I, as an individual, I have the same kind of potential power of learning as Marcus Aurelius Antonius, or greatest of scholars. I have the same sources, but they're not luxury, they become necessity at the time of uniformity and boring and less creativity, if there is such a thing. You always have the past. You go Bodleian University, Library of Alexandria. I was still on the board of Library of Alexandria. Nobody says we don't give it, it's an Egyptian. No, you give it because mankind's heritage. I believe it was organized to revive by Mitterrand and others helped Library of Alexandria to emerge as a Mediterranean empire, concept of Mediterranean rule. So we have to see to what extent libraries can in the background remain as the last resort to find objectivity, to find what subjectivity is. And so that's one of my hopes, is that libraries will not disappear, at least national libraries will not disappear. Public libraries, school libraries are losing, because everybody for the first time, and let me reiterate this, has entire knowledge of humanity at their fingertips, or just 1 hour flight from here, or 5 hours there. Irish have their own also contribution to humanity, their own diary. You cannot just plug pages of it and say it's enough. No. Many Europeans have Irish heritage. You have very European heritage. That's what Dutch government is helping you. It becomes also unity of everybody attending this banquet, bringing their own treasure. Nobody's without treasure, without creativity. And that's what garden is, consider the library as a garden. Garden is where you have a variety of roses, not just only one flower. And that's why European civilization, world civilization, all of them are interacting. And so I'm very happy about the fact that we've been able to have Library of Alexandria, Sorbonne, Oxford, but more proud also that we founded two national libraries in South Africa, Pretoria, because Africa has also preserved its heritage. Cannot be a continent without memory, without things that we have to take care of preserving them also. What I'm trying to tell you in short, it's not a luxury, it's a vital necessity for the soul of a nation, mind of a nation, and also future dreams of a nation, both as participant as well as a recipient.
When you talked about the last repository, the last resort library, that made me think of the Millennial Seed Bank, you know, which is where every type of seed is collated up. And I didn't know that you'd done two national libraries in South Africa. Yeah, and I think really that is one of the real joys of the virtual. I'm calling it now as obviously the virtual Trinity Library. But as all these join up, as long as there's the digital divide, you've got to have access to a computer, you've got to have electricity. But you know, then in theory, there's no reason why you can't be anywhere and accessing the whole accumulation of civilization and memory, as you say.
Well, one of the things I also did, because I was a historian of Afghanistan, I persuaded Library of Congress to repatriate Afghan legacy copies of everything they have on Afghan.
Oh.
All right, so Afghan university libraries will have what Library of Congress has. Library of Congress under late Billington wants to have World Library project. We helped, unfortunately, stymied since, but the day will come it will be renewed again. Because, again, because of the unity, knowledge cannot be fragmented, culture cannot be specialized and fragmented. So we have helped most of the libraries, major libraries they constitute this, including Sorbonne for the first time, and Library Bibliothèque Nationale as well. And Library of Alexandria, various university libraries, Bodleian, and you're in that category, all of you.
We're delighted to be in that category, Vartan.
Well, I tell you, the person who opened my eyes about Ireland is my dear friend, your former president of Ireland, Mary.
Mary can't be here. She's on an event for climate justice, as you can imagine. But she sends her warmest regards, and I'll be eternally grateful to her because she, helped us to first meet in Manhattan.
She came to Brown and she spoke about Ireland, and it was deeply touching, her affection and her dreams of Ireland and her contributions to it. So you cannot go wrong with all your donors listening. I hope they know they're preservers of world civilization, which has many cultures, subcultures and others. But there's one banquet, each one takes their own specialized thing with the world market, world banquet.
I think that's a beautiful metaphor. I was just thinking, where even, obviously, we've got the most phenomenal Irish collections, medieval manuscripts, the greatest collection of maps, Irish maps, the premier collection of Irish medieval manuscripts and so on. But we also have got global culture. We've got 3,000-year-old Egyptian books of the dead on papyrus. And the whole issue is to make them available. They shouldn't be just something that Trinity's keeping. We should open these up. Yeah.
Everybody is welcome to a piece of the knowledge. but somebody has to preserve them, protect them, make it available, and that costs money. The librarians have never been, how should I say, hoarding money. They all did to spend things on projects. They're most honest cultural promulgators because their aim is not to allow a book to remain silent, a book to remain dead book. There's no such thing, but to welcome people to have access. How many people do know their great ancestors? They all have a major industry ancestry.
Yes.
Well, they won't find out your own. How about find your own nations, your own extended family, and so forth, without cost reading about them, getting copy of it. It's fascinating. People are very much interested in their identity, especially in America. People have ancestry to see who they're descendants of. But imagine you're providing them already. They can, maybe once a year you should have Ancestry Day. You come. We had that in New York Public Library. I guess there's closed old genealogy division before all this ancestry became. You went, they told you which ship your parents came from, or which ship, and it stopped at, Ellis Island, and they found out Ellis Island, steerage came to Ellis Island, first class, second class, got off in Manhattan. It's not advertised that way, but to find their papers, they came, their signatures and so on, all for free, all right, as a curiosity. So libraries are full of curiosity element, full of discoveries, but you need to raise imagination of people to deserve that Preservation Act because they're part of it, whether they like it or not. So you can build a university, but more important, the heart of university is the library, as it was mentioned. When the library is open, university is open. Good knowledge never stops. Accumulation never stops. So I wish you, Helen, good luck and your great university, the provost and vice provost, and everybody who's helping you and helping Ireland. We take great pride, and I extend on behalf of all the people who love libraries to your gathered distinguished audience, thank you for helping the great library of Trinity College. Thank you for helping Ireland to be among the best of the nations in their resources. And thank you for being such world humanitarians, because you see civilization and culture as an entity, unity, rather than a fragmented smokescreen.
Bartan, thank you so much. I love that phrase, world humanitarian. I think that's what we'll call ourselves from now on. Thank you so much for this conversation. I could talk to you for hours, but thank you for your generosity, and thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your thoughts with us for the last hour or so. And I wish you well, and I look forward to seeing you in person. Please come back to Trinity, or I look forward to coming to Manhattan, having a Manhattan in Manhattan.
All right. Sooner or later, we'll have that too.
We'll have that too. Bartan,
and good luck to all the professors who teach there, and good luck to you and your administration. We hope Ireland will have its share, not only of the fame, but the duty to preserve human civilization, outcomes and results.
Bartan, thank you so much for those words. And I know you have to go, so I'll hand back to the Vice Provost, Professor Barkov, but Bartan,
one other thing, let me mention, I forgot.
Yes.
Andrew Carnegie, because his parents were Chartists, was not allowed in Dunfermline to go to local garden, which was open once a year. So he bought the garden and gave it to people of Dunfermline. So it could be free for all ideologies, all parties and others. It was there, I forgot to mention also that he rectified anti, what you call chartist attitude of the great order of the garden by buying it and giving back to the people of Ireland, people of Scotland, I'm sorry. If you were Irish, you would have done it for Ireland.
But it's also that wonderful metaphor you had about libraries being gardens. Vartan, thank you so much for sharing all your insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Provost. Thank you, Vice Provost.
Well, thank you very much, Martin, for your very inspiring and thought-provoking remarks, also for your good wishes. Thank you both, Helen and Martin, for this.
Thank you very much.
Conversation.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Allow me now, in closing, to outline briefly the benefits of the Virtual Trinity Library for teaching and learning, touching on many points that also came up in this inspiring conversation. The development of the Virtual Trinity Library is really an enormous boon for both academics individually and for the academy generally. It will greatly enhance connecting researchers to previously inaccessible materials, which now can be interrogated and analyzed. Exciting and rare primary sources, locked away in archives for decades or even centuries, will become open and accessible to all as a result of this Virtual Trinity Library. This initiative is, of course, part of a broader, fast-changing landscape of research and learning, Helen alluded to this, which have the potential to transform how researchers and students teach and learn. Connecting research at all levels, from the undergraduate to the established senior researcher to primary sources, has become so much easier and widespread, and allows for so many a much more direct access to the past. And as Martin reminded us, without the past, there is no future. Direct digital access to evidence and sources furthermore enables communities to build trust, a commodity more important and more endangered than ever. Trust in both research itself and in research institutions, such as libraries, such as universities. The Virtual Trinity program also aligns with central aspirations of our strategic plan, which we launched just before the pandemic hit a year ago, namely to focus on expanding the range of digital learning tools and embedding them within wider pedagogical practice. COVID-19, and that was also mentioned before, has added urgency to this, as currently students cannot collectively engage with their class in consulting our physical collections. Virtual Trinity will also assist curriculum development, as we have already seen with developments such as our new MPhil in Medieval Studies, which draws on the results of the digitization and preservation projects that are part of this initiative. It is noteworthy in this context that the Virtual Trinity Library program reflects the broad spectrum of research and expertise in the university, encompassing both humanities and science collections. This academic expertise across disciplines is harnessed in the steering group, which works with a wide range of academic champions to identify further collections for research, which will be made available to the college community and global audiences. Whether it is Elizabethan maps, literary manuscripts, political papers, diaries, photographs, medieval manuscripts, preserving and making accessible the unique and diverse collections of Virtual Trinity, which have been collected over 400 years, will contribute to us maintaining our place as the premier university in Ireland as we go into the next stage of our developments. This program will furthermore be enormously beneficial for future collections development. Showcasing our broad range of collections will be essential in attracting researchers, in attracting students and funders. Finally, Virtual Trinity will facilitate making connections between collections, researchers, and institutions, and broadening the international network of our university. Virtual Trinity will foster a global community of scholarship. Over the last hour, we have heard about the significance of the Virtual Trinity Library from a variety of perspectives. In the coming months and years, and inspired by this event today, many will work together. The academic champions, library staff, staff in Trinity development and alumni, researchers, and the steering committee to bring this splendid initiative to full fruition and unlock its full potential. After this inspiring hour together, all that is left for me is to express our gratitude to a number of people. First and foremost, I would like to thank Vartan Grigorian for being our special guest tonight and for your captivating insights. A big thank you also to the college librarian and to the provost for presenting the Virtual Trinity Library to us and for launching it. Virtual Trinity Library would not be possible without the collaborative efforts of many, but especially within the Library of Trinity College Dublin itself. The digital collections team in the library played a critical role in making this happen and creating the images and the website. And like Helen, I would encourage you to visit the website. It is really a feast. Equally, I want to thank library colleagues in preservation and conversation and in research collections and in the office of the librarian. A big thank you also goes to many colleagues across the college, including IT services for technical and hosting and IT storage support. A very important role in this initiative is also played by our colleagues in Trinity Development and Alumni, who support the philanthropic efforts of the Virtual Trinity Library. And last but not least, I want to mention two very important groups for the delivery of this project: the academic leads of the various strands and members of the Virtual Trinities Library Steering Group, including our external member, Richard Davis from the British Library. In closing, I want to thank all of you who attended this online launch. You might say that such a format is particularly fitting for a virtual library, and it is, but of course we would have preferred to invite you now to a glass of wine in the long room. That is not possible at the moment, but we appreciate your interest in the project and your attendance here today even more. Thank you again, stay safe, and goodbye.